Thank you everyone for attending FMT Consultants webinar, Procurement Expense Cycle, watching NetSuite in action. We've got a great crowd. We've got about an hour with you or maybe less. We're excited to be spending some time with you. My name is Felipe Jara. I'm the Senior Account Executive for FMT Consultants. And with me is Mr. Paul Clayton, Director of ERP Practice for FMT. Paul's got 14 years with FMT, so we've got a great resource. And we're looking forward to turn it over to Paul.
All right. Thank you, Felipe. Appreciate that. Appreciate everybody taking the time to attend our webinar today. We hope to give you some good information relative to some of the things we're looking to cover today. Initially, as Felipe mentioned, we're going to be talking about a few comments around a modern and unified system such as NetSuite. Then we'll jump into looking at NetSuite in action. So looking primarily at the procurement and expense cycle processes, as they relate to expense reporting. So we'll take a look at some of the setup and preferences relative to procurement and the approval process. We'll take a look at the employee center as well and learn some things in terms of what that's all about. The approvals workflow and how to set up the hierarchy. And this is out-of-the-box approvals workflow that's available within NetSuite that we'll be looking at today. We'll process some purchase requests, take a look at how to process those requests through the purchase order, as well as billing the purchase order, and then take a look, like I said, at expense reporting as well, and check that process out in terms of how it flows and leverages out-of-the-box NetSuite workflow. Just taking a look at the current landscape for a lot of the small and medium-sized businesses that we deal with out there. As Felipe said, we've been in business for about 19 years, and we see a lot of different types of systems out there in the business landscape today. Many of them are disparate systems. So you have a system that is running your ERP requirements and your ERP processes. You might have another system that's running your e-commerce requirements or your e-commerce system, and then you've got another system that potentially could be meeting your CRM component as well. So obviously with those disparate systems, integration needs to take place. We've certainly have worked with our clients in terms of helping them integrate those disparate systems, but that's an ongoing process relative to making sure that those systems are the integration is stable and that the error handling is dealt with quickly, and that when real-time integration needs to be there, it's there, as opposed to we also have had some clients where we've set up batch type integration, so it's kind of non-real time. So obviously there's a lot of work, both initially and ongoing, that needs to be addressed relative to the integration of disparate systems. When you look at NetSuite is an integrated platform with a single data source. So if you look at the e-commerce, financials, and CRM components, which are just a few components of the overall NetSuite solution, they're fully integrated into a single database. So you're not having to address those issues relative to integration on disparate systems. Some of the other issues that you might think of or think about are situations where you come up for an upgrade to your existing platform. With disparate systems, those upgrades become a little bit more difficult relative to ensuring that your integration is compatible with the new version that you're upgrading to. With NetSuite, again, that's all worked into the solution under the single platform, under the unified system. You upgrade the platform, and obviously you need to test your customizations and those kinds of things, but that's all embedded within a single platform and all upgrades at the same time. So really looking at here just three components of NetSuite: e-commerce, financials, and CRM, looking at how they really integrate and are connected simply right out of the box. There are other components of NetSuite, SRP being one of them. and many others in terms of one world type environments where there's multi-company and multi-currency that aren't listed here, but there's a lot of capability there relative to being on that, and advantages being on that single platform. So looking at that single platform, how does it help your organization? Well, in terms of all the different roles within the organization, it really improves the collaboration of your organization and the efficiency of your organization in each one of those roles, because everybody is looking at a single source of the truth. NetSuite also gives you the capability to integrate your vendors or your suppliers, your business partners, as well as your customers through specific portals that are available within the application. So again, improving collaboration not only internally with the unified system, but externally as well through your customers and your business partners. So enough about a unified business system in the comments. Let's jump right into looking at NetSuite and looking at the procurement and expense reporting processes so we can see what modern and unified looks like. All right, I'm going to go ahead and switch my screen, so bear with me 1 second while I share the appropriate screen for the viewers. Okay, so now you should be seeing NetSuite. I am logged into the home page of NetSuite where my dashboard is available. For those of you who haven't been in the application, I'm just going to spend just a few quick minutes talking about this in terms of what you see here. This is actually your home dashboard. So on your home dashboard, we can see that it's made up of individual sections or NetSuite portlets. So up here I've got a sales order tracking portlet or KPI. Down here I've got another one that looks at my current marketing campaigns in terms of the number of transactions that relate back to those specific campaigns in total dollars. I have some key performance indicators listed down here. And the key performance indicators are you're seeing just a few that are available out of the box. We can also through safe searches and whatnot create some custom key performance indicators that can be published to your dashboard as well. Over to the left, you see some additional items. A reminders portlet. So anything coming up relative to opportunities to close or maybe expense reports that I need to approve or purchase requests that I need to review will show up in the reminders portlet. I got some top items sold information over here in this one, and then we also have a recent records portlet listed here, which allows me to, rather than having to seek out or inquire on a specific master record that I might have been in or transaction, I can actually pull that record right out of my recent record. We'll click on the link in the recent record portlet, and that'll drive me directly into that master record or that transaction. And then I've got some shortcuts relative to the role that I'm logged in as well. That again are customizable in terms of the shortcuts that you may want to display or add to your shortcuts portlet. So there's a lot of good things relative to what can be done here in terms of your dashboard as far as personalizing it goes. All right, so let's jump into talking about some of the setup relative to the procurement and expense reporting process so that we can kind of lay the groundwork in terms of how the approval hierarchy works within NetSuite as you start to submit these types of transactions and push them through the approval process. All right, so initially we've got to have some company set up in the application to make sure that your workflow works properly. So we're going to jump into Setup, Company, and Enable Features. So over here, under the Employees tab, and under Time and Expenses, this is where we really need to make sure we've got the approval routing capability. And again, this is the out-of-the-box approval routing capability of NetSuite. We have to have this enabled here. So obviously the approval routing, where we route purchase requests and expense reports for approval based on approval limits, needs to be checked. We also need to make sure we have the purchase requests option checked to allow our employees to process purchase requests or PRs. And then lastly, in the case that in terms of what we're looking at today, expense reports. So using forms to ensure that an employee can enter an expense report online anytime, anywhere, having that option marked again. So that initializes or enables this functionality within the application. Okay, a couple more areas to look at. So let's jump into Setup, Accounting, and Accounting Preferences. Okay, over in the Time and Expenses tab again, under the General section, automatically notify the supervisor. So again, this is driving that workflow, just as those previous setup options were driving the workflow, out-of-the-box workflow. This drives the workflow such that any employee that you set up within NetSuite, you can assign a supervisor to that employee. So in this case, when somebody processes a purchase request or an expense report, we get an automatic notification to the supervisor. I'm going to jump over to this Approval Routing tab and just talk about it for just a minute. You'll notice that the expense report, purchase orders, and vendor bills boxes here, or options, are unchecked. The reason being there's really two, and you could kind of think of it as three components of workflow within NetSuite. The first is the out-of-the-box approval routing that we're talking about today. The second is sort of the out-of-the-box and available suite flow workflow that's available. These are actually enabled, and when they are enabled, they actually enable the suite flow component of NetSuite, which is really kind of drives you into that third option I was talking about. That's a customizable workflow tool that's available within NetSuite. So there's some general flows that are available in terms of suite flow for purchase order processing or purchase order approval, purchase request approval. But then what the suite flow component really lets you do is introduce more customized workflow for your expense reports and your purchase orders and your vendor bills. So we can introduce things like conditional reporting and conditional approval and that kind of thing. So there's some additional functionality relative to these that we do not have enabled today because these actually use the suite flow workflow component of NetSuite. Today we're just using the out-of-the-box, straightforward, available as soon as you enable it workflow option. Okay, so last thing I wanted to show you relative to the setup is over in the Company and General Preferences. Down here at the bottom we have Email Employee Upon Approvals. So when that creator of the expense report or the purchase requisition has submitted their document and it gets approved, they'll get notification that that document has been approved through the cycle if this option is checked. Right now I have it unchecked just to minimize the number of emails that we're sending out as we're moving through the process today. Okay, so that's kind of the company setup component. Let's talk a little bit about how you really start to drive the approval hierarchy based on the employee card. So if we jump into Lists, Employees, let's select that. Today we're going to be using two employee records that we've got out there. One of them is Aram Jung. So that employee is listed right here. He'll be the primary creator of the documents today. And then we've got Paul Clayton, which I've set up an employee master record for Paul Clayton, and Paul Clayton will be the approver that we'll be using today. So drilling back on Aram's employee card, we'll take a look at a couple things. Really, two of the tabs here contain most of the information relative to how the approval hierarchy works. The Human Resources tab is the first one. So if I select that Human Resources tab and I come down to the expense and purchasing section, you can see we can start to set some limits for expense reporting and purchase requests. So the expense limit set for Aram's employee card is $50. So anything that's above $50 would route to Aram's expense approver, which is Paul Clayton. Aram's expense approval limit is 0, so we currently can't approve any expense reports that get submitted to him. Moving over to the purchase request component, Aram's purchase limit is $100. Aram's purchase approver is Paul Clayton, and Aram's purchase approval limit is 0. So currently Aram is not in the approval hierarchy for approving purchase requests. The second important component relative to the procurement and expense reporting workflow is the Access tab on the employee card. So the Access tab really gives the employee access to certain roles within the application. So obviously this is security based, right? So any of the roles that are assigned to Aram's employee master record, which as you can see here as I'm scrolling through, there's quite a few roles. That really drives what he can do and what the user can access from within the application. So you can see here we've got Aram set up as an administrator, which we won't really use that role for him today, but we have him set up to access the Employee Center. Now the Employee Center is something that we'll take a look at in a little bit, which really is a central processing area for expense reporting and processing purchase requests, as well as doing time tracking and that kind of thing. If you're on the if your NetSuite solution is actually processing timesheets. So the Employee Center is, as I mentioned, it's a role. You can do, if the employee is assigned to the Employee Center, you can do a lot of different things within the Employee Center. Just a few of them, as I mentioned already, are processing and viewing your expense reports. Same with your purchase requests. If you are using payroll, you can look at paycheck history within the Employee Center. You can access your employee profile as well as your W-4 information. You can also enter activities, tasks, phone calls, process emails, access events or create events to add to the calendar within the Employee Center. So there's a lot of different things that the Employee Center offers to increase that communication and collaboration within the organization. But you have to have that Employee Center role assigned to the Employee Master. Keep in mind that the Employee Center also drives a restriction in terms of which purchase requests or purchase orders or expense reports that particular employee can see. It'll be restricted down to the purchase orders, the expense reports that employee owns. And obviously that's by design so that we can make sure that that employee is only seeing information and transactions relative to him or her. Okay, so that's a little bit about the Employee Center. So jumping into now that we've kind of talked through the master record information, let's go ahead and jump into processing some transactions. I think we've kind of covered the groundwork as far as what needs to be set up initially for somebody to be able to process a purchase request or an expense report. So I'm going to go ahead and sign out from here, and you should see now on your screen we've got Aram logged in to NetSuite, and he's logged in up here on the top right. You can see that he's logged in with his Employee Center role. So his Employee Center role is doing a few things. It's showing him a calendar over here. We've got a reminder of some calls and tasks that are complete and that are overdue. Some calendar activities that he's doing, recent records that were accessed, and then we've got a lot of links over here. These links are key relative to what Aram can do. So over here we've got some time tracking, timesheet processing options, as well as expense reporting and purchase requests. Okay, so let's go ahead and drive in a purchase request for Aram. All right, so what you would do to process a purchase request is come over here under Purchase Requests and select Enter Purchase Requests. Okay, so now Aram's in here, he's processing his purchase request. NetSuite actually generated a new purchase request record. Come down here, we'll select our vendor, kind of tab through, make sure we have our information filled out when we're going to receive this by, the actual date of the purchase request. This might be a purchase request for, let's say we got some research consulting time required. So we're going to put our memo in there, our location, and then we can start building out the line items for this particular purchase request. So I'm going to create a service purchase request in this case. The purchase request can be for service type items. It can be for inventory type items. So there's a lot of different types of purchase requests, which eventually will turn into a purchase order that can be processed here. So we're gonna purchase a service. We'll be purchasing, let's call it, I don't know, 12 hours of consulting time at, say, $125 an hour. So the total is $1,500. So we can set that in terms of what department that's for. Over here on the customer or job field, we can actually indicate whether or not, well, which customer this service is for, or project or job this service is for, and whether or not it's billable. So I can come in here and I can select a particular customer. In this case, we'll grab ABC Electronics. We can indicate whether or not this is actually a billable purchase that we're making, where we need to actually bill the customer at a later date. And there's some other information here in terms of whether or not it's related to an asset. So I'm done with this particular line. We can obviously add more lines, as many lines as we need to, before we submit this purchase request. Okay. Once I'm ready to go, though, I can come up here and I can click Save. So let NetSuite think about that a little bit, and then it actually creates a purchase request which says it's pending supervisor approval. So we saw earlier Aram's approval limit was right around $50. This is about $1,500, so obviously it's over his approval limit, right? So now we've got a purchase request out there for his approver to approve. So let's jump over into, we'll sign out as Aram, and we'll jump into NetSuite as Aram's approver. Bear with me one second while I log in. Okay, so now we're jumping into NetSuite as Aram's approver. Again, we've come right into the Employee Center. Right into the Employee Center of Paul Clayton, who was set up as Aram's purchase approver, right? And you can see over here in the Reminders portlet, we've got one purchase request to approve. So we can jump in right from the Reminders portlet and pull up that particular purchase request. We can also jump in over here under Approve Purchase Requests or View Purchase Requests or Orders. So a couple different ways we can get right in there. Since I've got the Reminders portlet up, I'm just going to go ahead and click on that. So it shows me here's Aram's purchase request for research consulting time required. The status is ready for approval, and it's sitting in here at $1,500. So if I want to see some of the additional details, this is kind of header information that's showing me on this purchase request, I can drill into this line, and we can actually see a little bit more information around this particular purchase request. Under the System Information tab, I can see a little bit about the audit trail and the history of this particular purchase request. We can see the item detail. And then we have our Approve or Reject button. We can print this purchase request out and email it off, associate any of our collaborative or communication activities relative to this purchase request, and sort of keep those activities related to this document. So as Aram's approver, I've reviewed this request, purchase request. I think everything looks good, so I'm going to go ahead and approve that purchase request. Okay, so once we've done that, let's jump back into the Employee Center dashboard. If I refresh my reminders, that reminder is now gone because I've approved that purchase request. So we're good to go. One thing to note is now that that purchase request has been approved, it is now sitting in NetSuite as an actual purchase order. NetSuite also knows that that was a service item purchase order that we just processed. So there isn't a need in this case for us to receive inventory into a location because we processed ARM processed a purchase request for a service-related item. So we've gone through kind of the approval hierarchy that we would need to go through. And by the way, we only saw one person in the one approval person in the approval hierarchy that we just used for this purchase request. Obviously, there can be many approvers within the hierarchy based on approval limit amounts. Okay, so we've actually got that purchase order in the system now. Remember that we set that as a billable purchase order, so we can actually process that billable purchase order. We'll look at that more on the expense report side. It works both ways, whether it's a purchase, or sorry, it works the same both ways, whether it's a purchase request or an expense report in terms of billing out the customer. So we'll see how that's done on the expense report side. But for now, I'll kind of continue through the process by logging on as the AP role so that we can actually bill that purchase order and take care of the liability side. Okay, so you can see I'm still in as Paul Clayton. I just changed my role to AP Clerk, and by doing that, kind of changed the presentation of my home page as well as the portlets that are available to me on the home page. Okay, so if I come down and go to the shortcuts menu here, we can actually bill that purchase order. So I've received my invoice from American Computers. So I want to go ahead and bill that particular purchase order. Here we are with American Computers, PO 1373 for the research consulting time required of $1,500. So I want to get this bill processed within the system for this purchase order. So we can go ahead and click on that bill and submit. So in this case, I've just selected one bill, but obviously if we wanted to pull in multiple entries for this particular bill, we could. All right, so NetSuite goes and creates a new bill. In the reference number, we can put that the invoice number or bill number or reference number. Okay, going through and kind of checking all the other header information relative to this particular bill. Everything looks good. We've got to make sure all of our required fields are addressed. Each one of the required fields are denoted by an asterisk next to the label of that field. Right? So everything looks good here in terms of this particular bill. So we're good to go. So we can actually click on Save. And now that invoice has been processed within NetSuite. So we've got it out there. So if we jump back to the home page of the AP Clerk role, we just billed that purchase order. Now the only thing left is really to pay that particular bill. Okay. So we can do that by coming into the bill payments window. We already got our AP account defaulting in and our checking account defaulting in through the setup that we've had. And then we can just come down to our American Computers invoice, select it, and save that so that actually generates the check. We're going to want to print this check. I'll go ahead and print it to screen so we can see that. So I'm going to select this particular payment to be printed. Obviously, again, if we wanted to select multiple payments and bring those multiple payments into one check, we could certainly do that, and that would be reflected in the amount field up here. But I'll just select that one invoice that we entered for American Computers, and we'll save that off. Okay, so that'll put it into the processing payment queue, which now is complete. So we're all set there. So if we jump into vendors, accounts payable, and print checks and forms, and over into the checks, select our account, cash account, and we can see our American Computers check that we just generated, and we can print that out. And there is our check stub format that was generated by NetSuite. Okay, so that kind of takes us through the purchase request process in terms of generating that purchase request. It was submitted and approved, and then we got the invoice into the system for that purchase request, and then we processed payment for it. Okay, so let's look at the expense report side of things. So in terms of the approval routing setup that we looked at earlier, it's the same thing as far as the employee card and the way we've set up the approvals on the employee card. The expense report leverages that just like we saw the purchase request do. Okay, so we're going to sign out as Paul. We're going to jump back in as Aram. So here we are back into the Employee Center as Aram, and we can jump down now into the Employee Center home links and actually create an expense report. So instead of starting over in the purchase request, we're going to jump into expense report and enter an expense report. Okay, within expense reports, we can set up if there's an advance that was paid out, we can actually apply that advance to the expense report. So if we got a $100 advance, we put $100 in here so that if and when we go to reimburse the employee, that advance is taken into account. Okay, what is my purpose? So this might be travel expenses for week ending, and you can put in whatever your date is there. And then you can indicate the actual date of the expense report. And now we're ready to actually build out that expense report. So I'm going to come down to the line items on the expense report and these categories. I'm going to talk a little bit about these categories for just a minute. The categories are set up over in the company setup menus that we were in earlier, where you just indicate what your category is, your expense category is. So airfare, car rental, hotel, mileage. You can put some description around that to give you a little bit of description around the actual category name. And I think the last and most key component of that is you associate a GL account with each one of those categories. So as you're pulling these expense categories onto your expense report, the GL impact is automatically being set based on the GL account that is associated with that expense category. So in this case, I'm going to select airfare. Maybe we went on a trip. My airfare was $560. Maybe that was Southwest Airlines. Let's just make it instead, how about Skyway Airlines. Okay, set your department, set your class if you have those, and location. Again, we're on that customer job field, just as we saw in the purchase request. So we can, I'll use the same customer in this case, ABC Electronics, indicating whether or not this is a billable expense. So we can select that flag. If we have a receipt to attach or any kind of other file to attach, we can certainly attach that document to the line item. Indicate if this is a non-reimbursable expense to the employee, and then whether or not we have a receipt. Okay, and we can add that line. So let's add a couple more. We'll do a car rental. Car rental is $236. Again, we're going to pass that through to this customer. Is that a billable expense? Yes, that's a billable expense. And do I have a receipt? I do. And we'll add one more. Let's say we got, can't quite get there, we go, hotel. And my hotel expense was $335. And again, we're going to bill that to ABC. Oops. ABC Electronics, we're going to make that billable. And yes, I have a receipt. Okay, so Aram has gone through and he's built up his expense report. So we got an $1,131 expense report ready to submit. Okay, Aram can print out that expense report. Again, associate any other actions to that expense report, communication relative to task phone calls, attach any files, and submit. And again, he can do this from any computer or any device anywhere. So let's submit that expense report. Okay, so now that it's submitted, we've got a expense report that's pending supervisor approval. So we're going to go ahead and sign out as Aram. We'll sign back in as Aram's approver. Okay, so now we're back in as Aram's approver in the Employee Center. And if we take a look at our reminders, we've got one expense report to approve out there. Okay, so again, same as the purchase request, we can actually access that expense report to approve it under the expense reports and approve expense reports or view expense reports options here. These links, or we can jump right in and we can select it right from our reminders portlet. I like to use the reminders portlets because they're there and they refresh and they show you what you need to do. Okay, so we can jump in and we can actually drill back into, much like we did for the purchase request, the expense reports allows us to drill back into the expense report and take a look at the detail. Again, we've got kind of an audit trail in terms of the processing of that expense report and who has approved what and what the old values and new values were in terms of status. Okay, so let's jump right in and we can approve that expense report. Okay, so with expense reports, there's kind of two components that we have to consider. So we just took it through the operations hierarchy, if you will. It also has to go through an accounting-based approval for your expense report. So your accounting-based approvals are associated to the roles that are set up within NetSuite. So let's push this expense report through that accounting-based approval so that we can go on and we can bill the customer and we can reimburse the employee. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and log myself into a role that I know has that accounting-based approval. So bear with me while I grab that. I'm just going to grab the CFO role for the Gill company. Okay, and over here under their reminders, we've got one expense report to approve. So we can drill back to that. This looks much like the same one we saw earlier. Obviously, we're under a different role, right? Before I was in the Employee Center role. Now I'm on the CFO role. CFO can drill back into that expense report, look for additional information, or they can just select that box and we can save that approval. Now this this expense report has gone through the accounting approval process, and we're ready to continue with the processing of this transaction. Okay, so if you remember, we actually set that to be a billable expense, right? So we can jump in as the AR clerk now, and we can bill this particular customer. You can see on this particular role under AR clerk, we have a reminders portlet with 4 customers to bill. If I click on those 4 customers to bill, one of those customers is ABC Electronics. So it's for $2,631, which is a little more than our $1,131 that we just processed. But there's other things there. The purchase request that we processed earlier is included in that, so the PO as well as the expense items. So we're going to pull that together in this case. Okay, we can drill back to the detail of this particular invoice, and then we can just submit that invoice. So now it's out there. It's going to create. It's in progress right now, but it's going to go ahead and create that particular invoice. So that invoice is now created and complete. Okay, so we've actually generated the invoice so that we can bill our customer and pass through those expenses to our customer. Okay, so the next very important part is making sure that we have the opportunity to reimburse the employee. All right, so we set that as a reimbursable expense as we were processing this expense report. So let's jump out and be able to do that. So we need to jump into a different role to process this expense report. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to drop down and we're going to grab the AP role. Okay, so now we're in the AP clerk role and we can go ahead and pay bills. So let's do that. So we're going to pay bills in this case. It'll bring us up to our expense reports and listing those out for Aram, who had that expense report that we submitted for $1,131. Okay. We can actually filter this view. So if you don't want to see so many documents, you can filter this view and select your different options, your different document types here to be able to filter that view down a bit. Aram's document is right up top, so I'm just going to mark that. We'll go ahead and select the to be printed. So I want to generate a check in this case, and we'll save that off. Okay, so NetSuite is now processing that check. It's good to go. So let's jump back into the home page, and under vendors, accounts payable, and print checks and forms, like we saw earlier, after we select our cash account, we can print out our check for Aram. So again, there's our check stub format for Aram's reimbursement. All right, so that takes us through the process of purchase requests as well as processing expense reports. So as you can see, all done within one system and all done within a single platform. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and jump back over to my, my slide deck and do a little recap here of what we looked at. So bear with me while I change my screens.
Paul, sorry for interrupting. This is Ilya speaking. I have a couple of questions that I would like to ask. I don't know if it's the good time.
Yeah,
there are a couple of questions in a queue.
Yeah, sounds good. Go for it, Ilya.
Okay, thanks. Great. Just want to know, one of the panelists asked, is the conditional approval routing possible with the out-of-the-box approval setup?
Conditional approval routing is actually not possible with out-of-the-box. Conditional approval routing, which I guess when you talk about conditional approval routing, one example of that might be if somebody was to submit a purchase request for a particular item, you'd want that purchase request to route to a specific individual. That kind of conditional routing is not available with out-of-the-box. The out-of-the-box workflow we looked at today, but if you were to enable the SuiteFlow component that we talked about a little bit earlier, you certainly could use and configure conditional routing within conditional approval routing within SuiteFlow. Are there any other questions? I haven't looked at the question queue, but
yeah, one more question. Can email notification text be modified? Can it be customized?
The email notification text, unfortunately, that can't be modified. That email text is out of the box, and the links are set, and the text is set for those email notifications.
So
anything else?
If the approver is on vacation, if the approver is on vacation, can we redirect the message to somebody else?
That's kind of like a proxy approver. Again, out-of-the-box routing approval capability will not allow for a proxy approver. So if somebody's on vacation and you want to displace a particular person in the hierarchy with somebody else. That's not possible out of the box. However, with the SuiteFlow component, we can configure a proxy. So if somebody goes on vacation or somebody's going to be out for an extended period of time and you wanted to replace that person in the hierarchy, you certainly could.
Yeah. Somebody just asked if the Employee Center is free. No, unfortunately, Employee Center is a special NetSuite license. It's cheaper than a regular NetSuite license, but it's not the same as Customer Center or Vendor Center. And I think these are all the questions, Paul.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Ilya. Appreciate you being on the panel today and monitoring the questions. Okay, so let's jump in and talk through our recap. So we looked at NetSuite procurement processes and expense reporting processes in a unified business system. So what we looked at today was out-of-the-box approval workflow for purchase requisitions and employee expense reports, and we kind of took that beyond into the the AP and the billing aspect of those if they are billable to the customer or reimbursable back to the employee. We looked at the Employee Center. Through the Employee Center, we created and improved purchase requests and expense reports. So that was really that center is the point of collaboration for being able to log in and as an approver approve purchase requests or expense reports, or as a creator being able to create those as well. We kind of took that a step beyond in terms of creating and approving those documents and looked at billing them to the customer, as I just mentioned, as well as the purchase order processing aspect. So we didn't receive a purchase order into a location or into inventory today because we actually processed a service-based purchase order. But had we processed a purchase request for an inventory item, then obviously we would receive that once it was approved. We would receive that PO into its appropriate location and then build it and process payment against it from there. And then the last thing we did was, we actually processed the bill or processed the payment for purchase orders and expense reports. So doing that all within one system. Never left NetSuite to do those. And really just as you saw, kind of went back and forth between the different roles. And as we went back and forth between the different roles, we were very easily able to navigate through shortcuts and through reminder portlets to do what we needed to do. All right, so now you've seen NetSuite in action, so it's time to take action. So as FMT consultants, we'd love to help in any way we can. We're frequently offering leadership team briefings relative to NetSuite and talking about their business requirements, high-level requirements, and really helping companies determine what the next step is as they may be transitioning from a legacy system or transitioning to the cloud. Also very happy to help with generating an evaluation plan for a solution that meets your needs. So kind of taking it beyond that briefing and business requirements step and really helping your business develop a plan for implementing the solution. One other thing I'd like to mention is we have another webinar scheduled for June 17th. This is at 11 o'clock Pacific. So this webinar will be a NetSuite Suite Commerce. It'll be our second of 2 sessions. So Ilya did the first of the two sessions not last week, but the week before. Had a really good initial session on NetSuite Commerce. So he'll be doing the second of those 2 sections, which I believe will jump into some of the technical nature relative to Suite Commerce. So we're really looking forward to Ilya's presentation on June the 17th. So for Ilya, Felipe, and myself, again, we appreciate all of you attending today's webinar, and certainly feel free to reach out to any of the phone numbers or the email addresses on your screen. And again, we thank you for attending today's webinar.